It was another busy Monday morning in the bustling downtown office of Grandeur Enterprises, a renowned company with a reputation for excellence, and, as some whispered in corners, a culture that seemed to favor certain people over others. Marcus Bryant, the hiring manager, sat at his desk, already irritated. A stack of job applications stared back at him, each one representing another tedious interview he didn't want to conduct. Marcus wasn't shy about his opinions. To him, candidates were either fit for the culture or not worth his time. He had his own unspoken checklist, and when someone didn't tick the right boxes, be it their experience, appearance, or background, he didn't bother hiding his disdain. As he flipped through the resumes, his eyes landed on one that made him pause. The name at the top read, Danielle Carter. A slight scoff escaped his lips as he noticed her address, a neighborhood he deemed the wrong side of town. His smirk grew wider when he skimmed the details. An Ivy League education, accolades in business leadership, and a resume that screamed overqualified. But none of that mattered to Marcus. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the small profile photo attached to the application. The woman in the picture was undeniably professional, sharp suit, confident smile, but Marcus didn't see ambition or talent. He saw something else entirely. With a dramatic flair, Marcus crumpled the paper in his hand, tossing it into the shredder beside his desk. The machine hummed as it devoured the application, and Marcus leaned back in his chair, laughing softly. "Next," he said to himself, as though he'd just done the company a favor. But what Marcus didn't know was that Danielle Carter wasn't just another applicant hoping for a job. She was about to become something much more significant. Someone who would upend everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and fairness. Danielle Carter wasn't looking for a job. She was stepping into a role no one in that office saw coming. Hours later, as the office buzzed with activity, whispers began to circulate among the employees. A new CEO was arriving that week, someone who had been handpicked by the board to shake things up and bring fresh energy to the company. No one knew much about her yet, but there was a growing excitement, mixed with a touch of fear. Change often carried uncertainty, and at Grandeur Enterprises, uncertainty wasn't always welcomed. As Marcus continued his day, oblivious to the shifting tides, Danielle Carter was preparing for her debut. She wasn't just stepping into a leadership role, she was stepping into a battlefield. Years of hard work, perseverance, and overcoming silent biases had prepared her for this moment. And while she didn't know Marcus personally yet, she had dealt with people like him her entire career. The stage was set, and the players were unknowingly stepping into their roles. Marcus, with his arrogance and misplaced confidence, believed he held the power to decide who belonged and who didn't. Danielle, armed with poise, intelligence, and an unshakable resolve, was about to show him, and the entire office, what real leadership looked like. By the end of that week, the dynamics at Grandeur Enterprises would never be the same. But for now, Marcus laughed, Danielle prepared, and the rest of the office unknowingly waited for the storm that was about to change everything. The office buzzed with a nervous energy that week, as employees tried to piece together bits of information about the incoming CEO. The higher-ups were unusually tight-lipped, fueling speculation. Some thought it might be a seasoned executive from outside the industry, while others whispered that it could be someone internal, chosen to climb the ladder faster than expected. Marcus barely paid attention to the chatter. He figured whoever was coming in wouldn't affect him. As far as he was concerned, he had his systems, his team, and his way of doing things. A new CEO wasn't about to change the comfortable bubble he had created for himself. But behind the scenes, Danielle Carter was quietly making moves. Her arrival was no accident. It was a calculated decision by the board. Grandeur Enterprises had been struggling with internal issues for years. Allegations of favoritism, a lack of diversity in leadership, and a toxic work culture that had driven away talented employees. Danielle had been brought in to fix it. Her reputation for turning struggling organizations into thriving, inclusive workplaces made her the perfect candidate. Danielle had always been a fighter. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she learned early that she'd have to work twice as hard to get half as much recognition. But instead of letting that reality defeat her, she used it as fuel. She excelled in school, earned scholarships to prestigious universities, and climbed the corporate ladder with grace and determination. Along the way, she encountered people like Marcus. Those who underestimated her, dismissed her, or even tried to sabotage her. Each time, she proved them wrong. As she prepared for her first day at Grandeur Enterprises, Danielle thought about the challenges ahead. She knew this would be more than just a job. It was an opportunity to reshape a company from the inside out, to create a workplace where talent and hard work mattered more than superficial judgments. But she also knew it wouldn't be easy. Change rarely was. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his usual routine, blissfully unaware of what was coming. His day-to-day life revolved around small power plays, deciding which candidates deserved a callback, which employees got an extra workload, and which voices he could safely ignore. He thrived on the sense of control it gave him, never questioning whether his decisions were fair or justified. But cracks in his carefully curated world were starting to show. Some of the younger employees, frustrated by the lack of opportunities, had begun speaking up in team meetings. Others were quietly applying to jobs elsewhere, unwilling to stay in a place where they felt undervalued. And though Marcus pretended not to notice, the growing dissatisfaction was impossible to ignore. By midweek, the whispers about the new CEO had reached a fever pitch. The office was abuzz with theories, and even Marcus found himself curious. He overheard snippets of conversations in the break room, employees speculating about what kind of changes the new leadership might bring. "I heard she's a real game changer," one voice said. "Someone who's not afraid to shake things up." "Yeah, but what does that mean for us?" Another replied. "Are we talking layoffs? A complete restructure?" Marcus rolled his eyes as he walked past. Game changer or not, he doubted the new CEO would bother with someone like him. He was good at his job, or so he believed, and his department ran smoothly, or at least smoothly enough. What Marcus didn't realize was that Danielle had already reviewed his department's records. As part of her preparation, she had studied the company's internal dynamics, identifying areas of concern. Marcus' name had come up more than once. Employee turnover in his department was unusually high, and exit surveys painted a troubling picture of his management style. Danielle didn't judge people based on hearsay, but she paid attention to patterns, and Marcus' pattern was one she couldn't ignore. The day before Danielle's official arrival, the tension in the office was almost palpable. Employees straightened their desks, updated their resumes, and speculated about what kind of leader she would be. Marcus, however, remained indifferent. He had seen CEOs come and go, each promising to bring change, and none of them making much of a difference in his world. That night, Danielle stood in her new office, looking out over the city skyline. The weight of the task ahead wasn't lost on her, but she felt ready. She thought about the people she was about to meet, the ones who would welcome her, the ones who would resist her, and the ones who would try to undermine her efforts. She thought about Marcus, though she didn't know his name yet, and the shredded resume she would never see. Danielle knew that change wasn't about grand speeches or sweeping policies. It was about understanding people, earning their trust, and showing them that a better way was possible. It was about standing firm in the face of resistance and proving, through actions, that everyone deserved a chance to succeed. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early, as he always did, ready for another ordinary day. He greeted a few colleagues, grabbed his coffee, and settled into his desk, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside his bubble. When Danielle Carter walked through the doors of Grandeur Enterprises for the first time, heads turned. She moved with quiet confidence, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. The whispers that had filled the office all week fell silent as employees stole glances, trying to gauge what kind of leader she might be. Marcus hadn't bothered to join the welcoming crowd, assuming it was just another overhyped moment. But when he finally looked up from his desk and saw Danielle being introduced to the team, his smirk faltered. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. As Danielle's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Marcus, there was no hint of recognition or judgment in her expression. But something in her calm, steady gaze made Marcus shift uncomfortably in his seat. The game was about to change, and Marcus was still playing by the old rules. Danielle spent her first day observing, walking through the office with an easy smile but sharp eyes. She introduced herself to employees in every department, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to their answers. Her presence was magnetic yet approachable, leaving many employees pleasantly surprised. It wasn't every day that the CEO asked the junior staff about their workload or inquired about their career goals. But not everyone welcomed her arrival. Marcus watched from a distance, his unease growing with each passing moment. He couldn't shake the feeling that something about Danielle was different. She wasn't like the other CEOs he'd encountered, those who stayed hidden in their corner offices, far removed from the everyday workings of the company. Danielle was digging, asking questions that felt too close to home, and it unnerved him. That afternoon, Danielle called for an impromptu meeting with the department heads. The invitation landed in Marcus's inbox, and he read it with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. He prided himself on being prepared for any meeting, but this last-minute call threw him off balance. So, he put on his best suit and headed to the boardroom, determined to make a strong impression. When he entered the room, Danielle was already there, chatting casually with a few managers. She greeted Marcus warmly, her handshake firm and professional. For a moment, Marcus felt a flicker of relief. Maybe she wasn't as intimidating as he had feared, but as the meeting began, that relief quickly vanished. Danielle started by thanking everyone for their hard work and acknowledging the challenges the company had faced in recent years. Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of determination that made it clear she wasn't here to maintain the status quo. "I believe in transparency," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "This company has incredible potential, but we can't ignore the areas where we've fallen short. My goal is to create an environment where everyone feels valued, where talent is recognized, and where we're all working toward the same vision." Her words were met with polite nods, but Marcus could feel the tension in the room. Some of the other managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly wondering what changes might be coming. Marcus, however, stayed silent, his expression carefully neutral. Then Danielle dropped the first bombshell. "As part of my transition, I've been reviewing departmental performance and employee feedback," she said. "It's clear that while some areas are thriving, others need significant improvement. In the coming weeks, I'll be meeting with each of you individually to discuss your teams, your challenges, and how we can work together to address them." Marcus stiffened. Employee feedback. That could only mean one thing. Someone had complained. He forced a smile, hoping to mask his discomfort, but his mind raced. Who had spoken up? What had they said? And more importantly, how much did Danielle know? After the meeting, Marcus returned to his office feeling rattled. He tried to convince himself that he had nothing to worry about. He had been with the company for years, his performance reviews were solid, and his team always hit their targets. But deep down he knew there were cracks in his carefully constructed image. As the week went on, Danielle's presence became impossible to ignore. She met with employees at all levels, asking pointed questions about their experiences and gathering a mountain of information. The more she learned, the clearer the picture became. There were pockets of the company that thrived, fueled by supportive leadership and a collaborative culture. But there were also departments, like Marcus's, where morale was low, turnover was high, and employees felt overlooked. One afternoon, Danielle sat down with a young woman named Leah, a junior analyst in Marcus's department. Leah had been with the company for 2 years, and while she loved her work, she often felt invisible. Despite her strong performance, she had been passed over for promotions and rarely received feedback from Marcus. When Danielle asked Leah about her experience, the young woman hesitated. She didn't want to seem ungrateful or risk retaliation, but something about Danielle's genuine interest encouraged her to speak up. "I love what I do," Leah said carefully, "but sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I work, it's not enough. I try to share ideas and take on more responsibility, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. It's like there's an invisible wall I can't get past." Danielle nodded, her expression thoughtful. She had heard similar sentiments from others in Marcus's department, and it was becoming clear that the issue wasn't the employees, it was the leadership. Later that day, Danielle reviewed the data she had gathered. The patterns were undeniable. Marcus's department had one of the highest turnover rates in the company, and exit surveys painted a damning picture of his management style. Words like dismissive, biased, and unapproachable appeared repeatedly. But Danielle wasn't one to act impulsively. She knew that confronting Marcus without concrete evidence or a plan would only backfire. Instead, she decided to observe him more closely, to see for herself whether the rumors were true. Over the next few days, Danielle paid unannounced visits to Marcus's department, sitting in on team meetings and watching his interactions with employees. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. Marcus was polite on the surface, but his behavior was laced with subtle dismissiveness. He interrupted employees mid-sentence, ignored their ideas, and made little effort to engage with his team. In one meeting, a young man named Aaron nervously suggested a new approach to a project. Marcus barely looked up from his laptop before dismissing the idea with a curt, "That's not how we do things here." Danielle noticed the way Aaron's shoulders slumped, the spark of enthusiasm extinguished in an instant. By the end of the week, Danielle had seen enough. She didn't need any more evidence to know that Marcus was part of the problem. But she also knew that fixing the issue wouldn't be as simple as confronting him. Change required strategy, patience, and, most importantly, buy-in from the people affected. As Danielle prepared for the next phase of her plan, Marcus remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He continued his routine, confident that he could ride out whatever changes Danielle might bring. But Danielle wasn't just bringing change, she was bringing accountability. And for Marcus, that meant his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. In the following weeks, Danielle's strategy unfolded like a well-played chess game. She began by holding anonymous feedback sessions, allowing employees to share their experiences without fear. The stories that emerged painted a troubling picture, especially in Marcus's department. Employees described feeling undervalued, overworked, and dismissed. One account in particular stood out. An intern recalled how Marcus had laughed at her suggestion during a meeting, only to later present the idea as his own. Danielle listened carefully, her resolve hardening with every word. But instead of confronting Marcus directly, she decided to give him an opportunity to reveal his true nature. She requested a one-on-one meeting with him, framing it as a casual check-in. When Marcus arrived, he was his usual self, confident and slightly smug. He sat across from Danielle, unaware that she had already pieced together the puzzle of his management style. "Marcus," Danielle began, her tone neutral but firm, "I've been reviewing the performance and feedback from various departments. Your team has consistently hit its targets, and I want to commend you for that. However, I've also noticed some trends in the feedback that concern me." Marcus's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Well, you know how it is," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Some employees are just sensitive. You can't please everyone." Danielle's expression didn't change. That may be true, but creating a supportive work environment isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about fostering collaboration, respect, and growth. "I'd like to hear your perspective on the turnover rates in your department and the feedback I've received about communication challenges." Marcus shifted in his seat, his confidence visibly wavering. "Look, I run a tight ship," he said. "I set high standards because I believe in pushing people to their full potential. If some can't handle it, maybe this isn't the right place for them." Danielle's gaze didn't waver. "I appreciate your perspective," she said, her voice steady. "But I also believe that leadership is about bringing out the best in people, not breaking them down. I'll be conducting a full review of your department to identify areas for improvement." Marcus nodded, but his mind was spinning. A full review? That sounded ominous. He left the meeting feeling unsettled, but he convinced himself that he could weather the storm. After all, he faced scrutiny before and always came out unscathed. What Marcus didn't know was that Danielle had already set the wheels in motion. She reached out to the employees in his department, offering them training and resources to help them thrive despite the challenges they faced. She also began closely monitoring Marcus's behavior, documenting instances of bias and misconduct. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Danielle decided to test Marcus in a high-stakes situation. She announced a company-wide initiative to promote diversity and inclusion, a project that would require input from all department heads. Each leader was tasked with presenting a plan to improve hiring practices and create a more inclusive workplace culture. Marcus was visibly annoyed by the initiative, dismissing it as unnecessary. But he had no choice but to comply. He threw together a half-hearted proposal confident that it would be enough to appease Danielle. When the day of the presentations arrived, Danielle sat at the head of the table, listening intently as each department head shared their ideas. Some proposals were thoughtful and innovative, showcasing a genuine commitment to change. But when it was Marcus's turn, his presentation fell flat. He spoke in vague terms, using buzzwords without substance. Danielle noticed the way his colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unimpressed. But it wasn't until the cue and a session that Marcus's true colors came to light. One of the junior managers asked a simple question about how Marcus planned to implement his proposed changes. Instead of answering directly, Marcus deflected, making a sarcastic remark about how certain people were too focused on appearances rather than results. The comment landed like a lead balloon, and the room fell silent. Danielle felt the tension in the air but remained composed. She thanked Marcus for his presentation and moved on to the next speaker. But internally, she knew the time for observation was over. Marcus had not only failed to rise to the occasion, but had also revealed his lack of respect for the initiative and the people it aimed to support. As the meeting wrapped up, Danielle stayed behind, reviewing her notes. She wasn't one to act impulsively, but she knew she couldn't let Marcus's behavior go unchecked. His actions weren't just affecting his department. They were undermining the company's values and alienating talented employees. The next day, Danielle called an emergency meeting with the executive team. She laid out her findings, presenting a clear and compelling case for why Marcus' leadership was detrimental to the company. She shared specific examples, backed by data and employee testimonies, leaving no room for doubt. The room was quiet as the executives absorbed the information. Some were visibly uncomfortable, clearly grappling with the implications. Marcus had been with the company for years, and his departure would send shockwaves through the organization. But Danielle was prepared for that. She knew that true change required difficult decisions, and she was willing to face the consequences. Meanwhile, Marcus remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. He carried on as usual, oblivious to the fact that his days at the company were numbered. But the employees in his department began to notice subtle changes. They saw Danielle spending more time in their office, taking an active interest in their work and encouraging open communication. For the first time in years, they felt a glimmer of hope. As the tension reached its peak, Danielle prepared for the next step in her plan. She knew that confronting Marcus wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was necessary. The stakes were high, and the future of the company depended on her ability to lead with courage and integrity. The day of reckoning was fast approaching, and everyone could feel it. The question on everyone's mind wasn't just what would happen next, but how. As the day of the executive meeting approached, Danielle knew she had to be meticulous. The stakes were even higher than she initially thought. Over the past few days, an anonymous whistleblower had reached out to her, providing damning evidence of Marcus's behavior that went beyond his department. The whistleblower, who claimed to have worked closely with him in the past, shared emails and reports that exposed a pattern of misconduct, favoritism, and outright sabotage of employees who didn't fit his mold. Danielle couldn't believe the lengths Marcus had gone to protect his image while destroying others. The most shocking revelation, however, was a paper trail suggesting that Marcus had actively blocked several high-profile candidates from being hired, candidates who were women, people of color, or from non-traditional backgrounds. One name on the list made Danielle freeze, her own. Years ago, before she became the CEO, Danielle had applied for a leadership position at the company. Her application had been shredded by Marcus, just as he had done to countless others. Danielle sat in her office, staring at the evidence. The memory of her rejection stung, but it also fueled her determination. She had succeeded despite Marcus's biases and gatekeeping, but how many others had been denied the chance to prove themselves? This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about dismantling a toxic culture that had thrived under his watch. Meanwhile, Marcus remained oblivious to the mounting evidence against him. He had heard whispers about Danielle's increased presence in his department, but he dismissed it as her trying to micromanage. He was confident that his years of service and connections within the executive team would protect him from any scrutiny. But Marcus wasn't entirely without suspicion. One of his closest allies, a senior manager named Greg, had overheard employees talking about the anonymous feedback sessions and the changes Danielle was implementing. Greg warned Marcus that something big was brewing, urging him to tread carefully. Marcus, however, waved off the concern. "Danielle's all talk," he said with a smug grin. "She's trying to shake things up, but she doesn't have the guts to take me down." What Marcus didn't realize was that Danielle wasn't working alone. She had quietly assembled a task force of trusted allies within the company, people who believed in her vision and were willing to help expose the truth. Together, they gathered more evidence, interviewed employees, and prepared a comprehensive case against Marcus. Just days before the meeting, Danielle decided to test Marcus one last time. She invited him to a private meeting, framing it as an opportunity to discuss his future with the company. Marcus walked into her office with his usual arrogance, confident that he could charm his way through any conversation. "Marcus," Danielle began, her tone calm but firm, "I wanted to speak with you about the direction of your department. I've noticed some patterns that concern me, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can address them." Marcus smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Look, Danielle, I know you're new to this level of leadership, but I've been doing this for years. My methods work, and the numbers back me up. Sure, some people complain, but that's just noise. You can't let it distract you from the bigger picture." Danielle's gaze didn't waver. "I appreciate your confidence, but leadership isn't just about numbers. It's about people. And the feedback I've received suggests that your approach has alienated many talented employees." Marcus's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a hint of irritation. "With all due respect, Danielle, I think you're overreacting. If we start pandering to every complaint, we'll lose our edge. This is a business, not a charity." Danielle let his words hang in the air for a moment before responding. I understand your perspective, Marcus, but I believe there's a way to achieve success without compromising our values. I hope you'll take some time to reflect on that before the meeting. As Marcus left her office, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Danielle's calm demeanor unsettled him, but he brushed it off as her trying to assert authority. He had no idea that the evidence against him was about to come to light, or that Danielle had one more card up her sleeve. The second twist came unexpectedly. Just hours before the executive meeting, Danielle received an urgent message from the whistleblower. The individual, who had remained anonymous until now, revealed their identity. It was Greg, Marcus's closest ally. Greg had grown tired of covering for Marcus and decided to come clean. He provided even more evidence, including recordings of conversations where Marcus had openly mocked employees and bragged about manipulating the hiring process to maintain control. Danielle was stunned but grateful. Greg's decision to step forward strengthened her case and added a new layer of complexity to the situation. She knew that revealing Greg's involvement would be a shock to everyone, especially Marcus, but it also proved that change was possible, that even those complicit in a broken system could choose to do the right thing. As the meeting loomed closer, the tension in the office was palpable. Employees whispered in hushed tones, sensing that something big was about to happen. Marcus, still unaware of the storm heading his way, continued his usual routine, confident that he was untouchable. But Danielle knew better. She had prepared meticulously, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The stage was set for the showdown, and the stakes had never been higher. Marcus's world was about to come crashing down, but the real question was whether he would go down quietly or take others with him in the process.